Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. It has been just over a month since Mississippi elected Tate Reeves to be the next governor, and it will be just about 5 weeks before he's sworn in. The governor-elect says it's been a busy balancing act, trying to manage the responsibilities of the government transition, planning an inauguration, and getting ready to move his family into the mansion. I sat down with Governor-elect Tate Reeves this week to talk about his plan to lead the state and how he will deal with a legislature that may have different priorities. First, Governor-elect, thank you for joining us, and congratulations to the big win in November.
Thank you, Byron.
Talk to us about how you're doing and getting ready for the inauguration. How's the transition going so far?
Well, things are going very well. It's very challenging. It's very complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. We have 15 agencies that report directly to the governor in the state of Mississippi. I did name Brad White as my transition director, and so he's helped leading the charge. We're hiring staff both for the transition and ultimately for the governor's office, as well as those state agencies. But I'm very fortunate in that, having served as lieutenant governor for the last 8 years, I certainly have been involved with the operations of government, and obviously have a great partner in Governor Phil Bryant, who has been very gracious in working with us to work on the transition.
You've talked during the campaign and during the election night, and during your acceptance speech, you talked about needing unity during this election cycle. What did you mean by that? And did you believe that we were very fractured during this period of time?
Well, look, campaigns are necessarily fracturing to people. There were an awful lot of people who went to the polls and voted for my opponent. But the fact of the matter is, they are Mississippians too, and we want to create an environment which helps every Mississippian prosper, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of who they voted for in the election. And that's something that we're very focused on, is making sure that we create an environment which encourages private sector job growth, creating opportunities for every Mississippian. And to do that, we believe very strongly that not only do we have to encourage and incentivize those entities to come and create jobs here, we've got to create a workforce. And therefore, we got to invest in our people and create that workforce that attracts jobs to Mississippi.
The big issues of this campaign were Medicaid expansion, it was infrastructure, and it was teacher pay. Let's talk a bit about Medicaid expansion. You have said you would not expand no matter what, but there are Republicans who have talked about wanting to expand if they were to come with a bill. Would that be an automatic veto from you?
Well, I will tell you, Byron, I believe that there was an awful lot of discussion, and in fact, my opponent spent almost $10 million trying to convince Mississippians that more government insurance was the way in which to go. And I think Mississippians overwhelmingly spoke out against that. And so we don't believe that's the right path. We need to understand that we have rural hospitals in Mississippi that are under financial duress, who have very challenging situations. We need to do everything we can to find innovative solutions to help in that regard. We want to ensure accessibility and affordability to health care to all Mississippians. And we're going to work hard to make that become a reality. But we do not believe that more government intervention in either the insurance markets or in healthcare is the right way to go. What
will you do to work with the other Republicans who believe that is an option?
Well, I will tell you, we've worked very closely with those in the legislature over the last 8 years, as well as Governor Bryant, to create an environment which facilitates working together. But I think Republicans spoke overwhelmingly out against more government intervention in healthcare, and I think many Republicans, if not all, elected officials understand that.
When it comes to infrastructure, we just have the lottery just started,
yeah.
But we know that's not going to be enough money to deal with the needs of the state. What are you going to do to bridge that gap and to fill in the money?
My understanding is that the lottery on the very first day created over $500,000 for infrastructure. The special session in the legislature back in 2018 created almost between $200 and $225 million per year. It was $1.2 billion in additional dollars for infrastructure. We've got to continue to work. That was a good first step. It was a good start. We've already got close to 375 bridges being fixed or under contract to be fixed with those monies. It's a good first step. We've got more work to do, and I look forward to working with those in the legislative leadership to find solutions. We know that no matter how many products we produce in Mississippi, if we can't get them to the marketplace, it doesn't do anyone any good. And so we've got to have an infrastructure model in Mississippi that gets our products to market.
As you build your team to take over the mansion and to take over your position, how diverse do you want to make your team going forward?
Well, we want to make sure, just as we did when I ran for lieutenant governor, that we include ideas from all individuals across Mississippi. You know, when I first got elected lieutenant governor, I brought all 52 members of the Mississippi Senate into my office, and I talked to them about the things that interested them. What issues do they want to work on? Now, obviously, at the end of the day, somebody's got to make a decision. And I'm a very strong conservative, and that's from where I come. But the reality is we need input from all Mississippians, and so we want to ensure that that we have diversity of thought and diversity that looks like Mississippi.
First 90 days, what do you want to accomplish in the first 90 days as governor?
Well, obviously in the first 90 days, the legislature will be in session. We want to make sure that we continue to focus on job creation, bringing better and higher paying jobs to our state. We also want to ensure that there's was a major issue in the campaign, and that is that we increase pay for our teachers. We're going to continue to stick by our proposals to increase teacher pay to the SREB average within 2 years and to the Southeastern average within 4. That is a doable goal given the fact that Mississippi is in the best financial shape we've ever been in. And we want to also work to invest $100 million in workforce development and workforce training, because we've got to train our workforce in Mississippi. We've got to invest in our people so that they can do the jobs of the next 50 years, not the jobs of the last 50 years.
There's an early estimate that the legislature will have about $100 million additional dollars in the coffers there. How do you plan to spend that money? Will it go to these initiatives and to the campaign promises that have been made?
Well, I will tell you, yes. I mean, we knew that we were going to have significant resources coming in. We passed the largest tax cut in Mississippi history a couple years ago. Our detractors said that would be devastating financially to Mississippi, and we said, no, we don't think that's the case. We think if you let Mississippians keep more of their money, they're going to go out and spend it, they're going to grow our economy, and that's exactly what's happened. We've seen record revenue growth in 2019. We're seeing record revenue growth in fiscal year 2020. We were up almost over 5% year over year last year. In the first 5 months of this year, it looks like we're going to be up even more than that. And so our conservative policies are working. Our economy is growing. And what we need to do with those additional resources is we need to either return the money to the taxpayers through additional tax cuts, or we need to invest in our people to ensure that we are paying our teachers a wage that is what they deserve, and also invest in our people through more workforce development, workforce training.
Some new leadership there. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann now will be going there. How's your relationship going to be with him, and how will you move forward working with some new leadership there in the legislature?
We've got a new lieutenant governor, but an awful lot of senators that have been there for many years. I understand that they'll be making some decisions over the next 3 or 4 weeks in terms of committee chairman, et cetera. But we've worked with those individuals, and we'll continue to do so. Of course, Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, has been there for 2 terms now, has done a fantastic job. And so I really look forward to working with Secretary Hosemann, Lieutenant Governor-elect Hosemann, and as well as Speaker Gunn, because I know that they want what I want, and that is to make Mississippi an even better place to invest capital and create jobs.
All right. Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, Governor-elect Tate Reeves, thank you for joining us, and looking forward to talking to you and working with you down the road. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Byron.
Appreciate you being here.
Good to see you.
All right, good seeing you too. Inauguration Day is Tuesday, January 14th, and we'll be right back. We're nearly 2 full weeks into the Mississippi Lottery. Day 1 brought a huge haul of money as people snatched up the first scratch-off tickets. But how are sales going ever since? And what about the plans to bring in the Powerball and Mega Millions? 12 News' Gerald Harris sat down with the lottery spokesperson to get an update.
Yeah, hello, I'm joined by Meg Annison of the Mississippi Lottery Corporation. She's the Director of Communications there. Thank you so much for joining us again. Very exciting time in Mississippi with the Mississippi State Lottery. It's been in place for about a week and about 4 days. Talk to us about what you're seeing there.
There is so much energy. On average, we have done about 1 million in sales every single day. I mean, the enthusiasm from the retailers, from the players, it's just, everybody is pumped up.
And it's still very new, and there's still a lot of learning processes that has to be undertook. Talk to us about that and how the retailers are adjusting and how you as a corporation is adjusting.
Absolutely. So during the whole process, we have been forming the organization, building the lottery, and also focusing on launching the scratch-offs as well. So there's just been a lot of work going into it on our end. And then it's new for pretty much everybody in the state, retailers, players, the banks. And so a lot of people are still figuring out what works better, what doesn't work. So retailers and players, everybody is just being really patient in the learning curve. And again, I overuse the word excited, but everybody is just very enthusiastic about what's going on.
And you touched on this a little bit. You talked about the first week and 4 days of playing. What kind of numbers are we seeing as far as that?
In the first 6 days, total sales reached 8.9 million, a little bit over 8.9 million. And that translates into about 1.9 million for roads and bridges. And that's a great number. And because we are continuing to sell tickets every day, that number is changing and increasing also.
And we talked a little bit about this before we got on here. The projection is kind of hard to project right now because it is very new and it changes every day.
Changes every day. We're a week and 4 days into this process. And so as we grow as a company and as we introduce new games, we'll have a better grasp on projections down the road.
And how much money so far is going to the state, back to the taxpayers, if you will?
Well, that's in prizes. In prizes, players have cashed in about 3.8 million. And the 1.9 million is for roads and bridges.
Oh, so they're getting a pretty payday. We saw on Twitter that a couple big winners.
We've had a lot of winners. Only one person so far has chosen to give their name, but we've had a lot of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 winners. Recently, we had a $15,000 winner, and that was pretty exciting. And we're going to get winners every day.
And talk about the growing nature of the lottery. They have an opportunity to win bigger money. You talked about the $15,000. You have a few tickets there.
Right. So next week, players will be able to play or purchase our next round of games. And as you can see, we have another $1 game. I'll let you hold that. Fast 50s. And the top prize on that is $2,000, and there are 12 $2,000 prizes in that game, and just a whole bunch of $50 prizes as well.
And you basically picked your favorite color.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the same game, but you have 4 color options.
I would go with the blue or the purple for the Titans in Northwestern.
Ah, got it.
So
then we have another $2 game and another $5 game, and the $5 game has top prize of $100,000, and there are 4 $100,000 prizes in that. And there are smaller prizes in all of these too.
And with many of these lottery tickets, it's about the appeal, the look of them, and I really particularly, this one stood out to me, the Mississippi Blues. And then you have little trumpets here that you can scratch off.
Yeah,
so that's a pretty unique way and kind of personalizing it to the state. So looking forward, there are going to be many more options like this for players to play, and you're rolling them out a little at a time just so a part of the learning curve, correct?
Part of the learning curve, so people don't become overwhelmed. We plan on introducing 4 new games once a month. And then, of course, January 30th, Powerball and Mega Millions.
And then there are seasonal games you're playing, I know.
Right. Right now we have Happy Holidays Y'all out, and that's obviously a Christmas-themed game. We might have something in the spring that's holiday-oriented, and, we'll continue down that path.
All right, thank you so much. Meg Annison is joining us from the Mississippi Lottery Corporation. We will be sure to make sure that we have this covered along with other matters here in Mississippi.
The race for president rolled into Mississippi this past week. Newly announced Democrat and former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg made a stop in Jackson. 12 News' Gerald Harris tells us Bloomberg was here to do more than campaign.
Yeah, he made his way to Mississippi to talk about criminal justice reform, despite some criticism on his past criminal justice policies, including stop and frisk.
As New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg embraced the practice of having police stop, question, and at times search people on the street for weapons and other contraband. Now, as presidential candidate, he's offering an apology.
On the practice of stop and frisk, I certainly got it wrong, and I regret that.
He offered that apology before sitting down with Jackson's mayor and other leaders to talk about criminal justice reform. But not everyone is on board with his apology, including Mississippi's lone black United States congressman. Benny Thompson has tweeted, "It's too late for fake apologies." Bloomberg's response:
He has a right to his opinions. I wish I were right every time in my life, but in 77 years, one of the things I've learned is you're not right every time. But I have also learned that when you make a mistake, you fess up to it, say I'm sorry, learn from it, and try to do better the next time.
The former mayor hopes a step in the right direction is pushing criminal justice reform. He wants the number of young people in jail to be cut in half, reduce the number of adults behind bars, and invest in the community-based strategies that will reduce crime. And Mayor Bloomberg said he hoped to come back in a few months, and he wants the South to be a part of his winning strategy. Reporting in Jackson, Gerald Harris, 12 News.
This past week, a federal appeals court heard arguments over a controversial Mississippi law that restricts the voting rights of certain felons. 12 News' Kate Cornell on the latest effort to get that law overturned.
The right to vote is a fundamental right.
Mississippi is one of just 3 United States that does not permit people convicted of certain felonies to vote.
Why individuals would not want people to vote now when we live in the greatest country in the world is beyond me.
Members and supporters of the Southern Poverty Law Center gathered on Tuesday in New Orleans to voice concerns to the Fifth Circuit Court, overseeing Louisiana and Mississippi.
You can push us down, but you can't stop us from getting back up.
Jody Owens currently serves as the Southern Poverty Law Center of Jackson's managing attorney and will be the next Hinds County District Attorney. He says everybody deserves a second chance and will make this a priority when he is DA.
When people have served their time, they deserve the opportunity to be functioning in society.
Right now, there are 22 types of felonies that lead to the loss of voting rights.
These are people who have completed their sentences, including probation and parole. They work, they pay taxes, they raise families, and they want to say.
6 former felons are suing to overturn the law, including Dennis Hopkins. He spoke at the rally about his mission.
We're here to stand up and get our rights back because our voice needs to be heard. Our vote needs to count. Don't ask me to pay my taxes and not let my vote count.
Wu says that the right to vote is the most important tool to use for self-determination.
It is the cornerstone of democracy.
Well, now to the impeachment inquiry, and this week, House Democrats announced that they will draft articles of impeachment against President Trump. We spoke with a local law professor about the case against the president and the arguments from both Democrats and Republicans.
I do think that the Democrats have laid out a case where reasonable people could conclude that the issue should go forward, that the factual grounds have been laid out. So I think there are really two kind of subsidiary questions or questions that lie underneath this. One is there a factual basis? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think where legal scholars are divided is whether on those facts it meets the definition of a high crime or misdemeanor as laid out in the Constitution. And I think that is something over which reasonable minds could differ. You certainly can't call the case for impeachment unreasonable, but nor can you call opponents unreasonable. After all, we are less than a year away from a presidential election, and there is a serious argument that the matter ought to be postponed and let the issue fall on the electorate. So I think factually that a substantial credible basis has been laid out that the president withheld money earmarked for foreign aid in order to solicit what he saw as a political advantage or favor for his campaign. That those facts are there. Now, whether that's a crime or a high crime or misdemeanor, I think those are matters on which there's a lot of room for debate and discussion.
We also asked Professor Steffi how this impeachment case stands up when compared to the 2 most recent ones against President Clinton and President Nixon.
Well, not to sound like Goldilocks, but I think significantly stronger than the case for impeachment against President Clinton, and in some ways significantly weaker than the case against President Nixon. I say significantly stronger than the case against President Clinton, not because there weren't enough facts to lay out that President Clinton had a sexual relationship with a subordinate employee, a young woman in the White House, and then lied in a deposition to cover it up and lied to the American people. But rather, those acts were not related to his duties of office, to his duty to execute the laws of the country faithfully, certainly not in the same way the allegations against President Trump are. Unlike President Nixon, who the allegations again were that the underlying issue involved an effort to get political dirt on an opponent. That also involved a burglary, a serious felony crime committed on U.S. soil in Washington, D.C. by people working on behalf of the president, and then the president orchestrated a cover-up. That seems to me to be a level of seriousness, I think, greater than what we are facing here. Again, I want to emphasize that we have the factual question, which I think the House has developed, and then the question of what to do with those facts. Now, I think realistically, impeachment is as far as it will go. I think the chance of 2/3 of the Senate agreeing on a question like this are so small as to be easily dismissed. I'm not confident 2/3 of the Senate would agree that apple pie and motherhood are good in the present climate, but certainly not on whether the president should be removed from office less than a year before an election in which he's going to stand before the American people.
The House Judiciary Committee will convene on Monday, and we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us. A reminder, if you missed this or any episode of Mississippi Insight, you can always check them out on our website, WJTV.com. For Gerald Harris, I'm Byron Brown. Make it a good night.